Hi, I'm Mark Roberts. Welcome to my YouTube station. Hello everyone, and welcome to my video about mixing guitars. See, I'm like mixing a guitar. Okay, so if anyone's been watching my channel, they will have seen me bang on about drums pretty much exclusively up until now. I think I've covered all the basics on that, and it's about time we had a look at mixing some other stuff. And I've had a couple of people ask me about guitars and specifically mixing kind of rock guitars in the context of a dense mix and how I approach that. So that's what I'm going to try and illustrate today. Been very lucky in that I've been given permission by the awesome Quiet Lions to show you around one of their mixes. Thanks very much, guys, really appreciate it. The song is called Echo Chamber. It's the first song that's going to come out on their forthcoming debut album, Absenteeism. This single is going to be available on all platforms on the 16th of April 2019. You can go and watch the video for this song on New Noise magazine, which is done by the fantastic Wild Stag, who've done loads of really cool music videos, so go and give them a follow as well. Okay, so to start with, I'll just show you the basis of this, which is the drums and the bass, which were tracked down at Brighton Electric in Studio One, and we tracked the bass and drums together. The whole band are fantastic musicians, so it was great to be able to do this, and it really gave us that nice sort of locked-in rhythm section. We had them both playing in the live room together, although the bass cab was separated off in one of the booths. I'll just give you a quick razz of a verse and a chorus, just because there's slightly different bass tones for the two. So this is the verse. Okay, and here's the chorus. Okay, so it was a Fender P bass into an Ampeg SVT vintage reissue, the silver face one. And then we took a DI which had a bit of SansAmp, just the stock Pro Tools SansAmp plugin that was providing a bit of the grit. I'll give you a quick illustration of this. So let's look at the verse one first. I'll just leave some of the processing so you can hear the kind of raw signal here. So we have the amp first, and I think it was an SM57 and a RE20 on one of the cones, kind of taped together so the diaphragms were lined up as best as we could, and then on one of the cones. So here's the 57. And the RE20. Okay, so those meet up quite nicely. It's just sort of a pretty classic bass tone there. So I'll play the DI on its own first without, and then show you what the SansAmp's doing. Yeah, so that's adding a bit of grit and cut to that sound. So this is what it sounds like all together. Okay, I'll quickly show you what I did in terms of processing. So we've got the mix rack here, which is just doing a bit of compression and then a bit of desk emulation. So first without and then with. Okay, slight volume drop there with the gain reduction, but that's just reducing our dynamic range a bit, so it sits in there. And then we have the Sheps Omni channel. Looks like this is doing a little bit of saturation and EQ, and a bit of compression as well. I haven't got time to go through every single process on this. I will do some more in-depth kind of more singular video, say just on processing a bass or something. But if you want to kind of pause the screen and have a look at the settings, I suppose you can, but I'll just show you without and then with, and then you'll be able to hear what it's doing. So that's giving it a lovely hug, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the main thing is the saturation with that one. There's a tiny bit of compression going on as well. This thump thing here is particularly cool. Just gives it a bit of low boost. Okay. Next up, a little bit more saturation from this black box plugin. I'll show you without and then with. So again, a little bit more saturation. That's just going to help it solidify a little bit. A tiny bit of leveling out there with the MV2 from Waves. That's a nice one for just helping your bass sit in the mix. We've got an R compressor here. This was sidechained to the kick drum just so that whenever the kick hit, there's just a tiny bit of gain reduction on the bass. It's probably quite hard to hear in solo. I'll try this along with the drums and we'll see if we can hear what that's doing. Yeah, very subtle thing there, but as I've said in previous videos, it's all these little micro moves that add up to hopefully something really great at the end. So that's just clearing a little bit of space to help the relationship between the bass and the kick drum. Next we've got the R bass from Waves. It's just doing a little bit of 80 Hertz on here. I'll show you without and then with. Yeah, so that's a really nice way just to add a subtle little bit more low end in there, and it's not too intrusive or anything like that. We've got Pro Q2 here doing some cuts, pulling about a bit of 180-ish and 115. This will have been where I'm just creating a bit of space for the guitars. So I think it was probably a case where if you find yourself turning, having a conflict between, say, the rhythm guitars and the bass, which is probably what it was in this case, you need to sort of try and locate where things are clashing. So by pulling these frequencies out, I found that it gave some other elements in the mix a little space to breathe. So I'll just show you this without and then with. Okay. The trim plugin at the end is just where I've automated the level throughout the track. I'm not going to go too much into automation today, but I can't sort of emphasize enough how important automation is when you've got particularly a more dense mix with lots of things going on. It's very rare you can kind of set and forget something. So just quickly, the chorus bass, I would have done the same processing on this, but I added a bit more distortion from the SansAmp plugin. Let me just show you what I've done there. So we'll just do it with the processing left on, because it will still illustrate what I need to show you. So here's just the bass amp, and then I'll add the SansAmp in to show you the difference. Okay, and I'll just show you the SansAmp on its own. Okay, so that's just adding more aggression and stuff to the choruses. Very similar sort of set of processing on there. So before recording the guitars, I would have split those into two. So it's one continuous bass take, but I would have split it onto another track so that for the choruses and the heavier parts of the song, we've got the amount of distortion that we're going to have in the final mix. That way, when we're adding guitars and things, we're not going too heavy on the distortion of the guitars. The guitar and the bass are kind of, they need to be harmonious. So that's why I did that. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the verses and the clean guitars. I don't want to spend too long on this because I think the main point of this video is to show how I layered the kind of heavier guitars and things, and it's already going to be quite a long video. So let's have a look at this. We've got Mike's guitar here, which was a combo in Studio One at Brighton Electric because we had a little bit of time left over from doing the drums. We had two mics on the amp, and I think it was a Josephson and a 57, I'm not exactly sure. And then the ambient mics here is the stereo pair that was left over from the drums in the hallway. So I'll just play you what those sound like. Okay, and processing wise on those, we've got a Pro Q2, which is just pulling out a little bit of low mids and doing a little bit of high passing and a little bit of low passing. This guitar is a kind of crunchy clean sound, I suppose. It's not your typical clean sound, and it's just honing in on what we needed. And then we've got the virtual mix rack, doing a little bit of brightening with the 1073 and then the virtual channel here. So I'll just show you that without and then with. So that's just pulling out a little bit of detail, and then just finished off with the VTM tape emulation plugin. I'll show you what that's doing. So that's pretty much left as when you load the plugin up, and it's just adding a very subtle bit of warmth and taking some of the edge off the transients there. And then we've got Luke's guitar over the other side, which is stereo track here is the Kemper.
Voodoo.
And then the other orange amp that we had set up, I've just used one of the mics there. Let's have a listen to the Kemper first without any of the bus processing. We did put a VTM on here, just sort of shaving some of the attack off there, bit of desk emulation and a bit of compression. So I'll just play you that without and then with. So that's just squashing it a little bit and taking some of the edge off of it, because this wants to be a nice mellow guitar. And then the other one is just a subtle little grumbly boy in here. And both of those together. And we've got a Pro Q2 doing a little bit of high pass there. We don't need to do anything too drastic in this section because it's not a particularly dense section. Then the Renaissance EQ, the Renaissance AAX compressor, doing a little bit of overall compression there. And then again the VTM just doing what it did to the other one. So I'll just play that and gradually introduce those so you can hear what they're doing. Right, let's listen to both of those guitars together. Okay, so they're kind of left and right, nice little counterpart thing. And then we did two little things to add some respective kind of ambience to each of those. One was to add this Rhodes here. So that's sort of floating around in the background. That's got a bit of stuff getting pulled out on the Pro Key too. It's got a little bit of compression there and a bit of tape. And then some, I think this is a kind of, you can operate this EQ in mid-side mode, and I'm just pulling a load out of the middle in the mid-range just to allow some space for the vocal probably, because this is just a subtle element, so you don't want it to eat up other elements in the mix. So these, let's add that into the stereo guitars. Okay, and then we did something to Luke's guitar, which is a cool little trick. The Soundtoys Crystallizer, this is a really cool plugin, and what we did with this is we sent Luke's guitar to this bus so that it would kind of create a pad underneath it. So this is a preset called Original Crystals. I may have tweaked it slightly, but it's more or less exactly as it comes up. There's a little bit of EQ, a lot of cutting going on after it, and then it's got a little bit of plate reverb after it as well. So I'll just show you what the Crystallizer's doing. It's being sent pre-fader, so we can actually isolate it on its own. So it's kind of what it says on the tin. It's making these crystalline sort of sounding, oscillating, reversey things happen. And when you put that in conjunction with the clean guitar, it just sort of adds something behind it. I'll just put the EQ and the plate in there so you can hear what those are doing. Okay, so that's a neat little trick. It's the kind of thing you can do with some of the Strymon pedals and things like that. But I thought that'd be a nice little trick to show you. So here's the guitars with their respective kind of underlaying ambience. There we go. Yeah, so that just adds a nice bit of a pad in the background on that. Lastly, I will just play those with the Rhodes and the ambient crystals kind of bypassed, and then I'll put them in with the rest of the mix. Okay, so I think that's quite effective, and things like that. So let's look at a chorus, and I'll show you Mike's guitar to start with. This was the first guitar we added on. Mike's the singer-guitarist and plays a lot of rhythm parts. He does do other kind of atmospheric bits as well, but we decided to do Mike first because it's the kind of foundation of the song. Luke, the other guitarist, does a lot more kind of leady parts and atmospheric bits, and also plays synths and keys and stuff like that as well. So this was the next logical step, as in what to add. So I'm just going to play them for you first, along with the bass and drums. Okay, so that's Mike's rhythm guitar part, and it's a doubled guitar part, just the same left and right, pretty much hard pans. The only difference between the two was it was two different guitars. So we had the same amp setup, which was a Marshall and an Orange with a Telecaster, and then he used his other Telecaster on the other side. So I processed them very similarly, slight different EQ for one of the Telecasters that was a little bit brighter. Let's have a quick listen to one of them on its own. I'll bypass the processing and show you the raw tracks real quick. That's the Orange there. And that's with the Marshall. They had two mics on each cab. For that one, for the mix, I've decided not to use one of the mics on the Marshall. So I suppose the Orange is the main sound, and the Marshall is just adding a little bit of bite and stuff that the Orange wasn't adding. The two mics most likely would have been a SM57 on axis, and then a Sennheiser 421 kind of at a 40 degree off axis, with the diaphragms kind of lined up so that you don't get any phase issues. Usually I find that the 57 is the main sound, and then add a bit of 421 in, it just gives it a bit of body. Let's look at the processing on this first guitar. We've got the virtual mix rack here, and just some very subtle brightening with the 1073 EQ, a little bit of distressor just to kind of even it out a little bit, just a tiny bit of compression. It's not the most saturated guitar ever. We didn't want that kind of big saturated guitar for this, so a little bit of compression just helped keep it nice and even. So that's why I did that. And then the virtual channel on the Trident setting, which just adds a little bit of something. I'll show you without and then with. So although that's adding a tiny bit of level there, you can also hear it's just bringing out some of the aggression of the guitar as well, and it's just helping to pin it a little bit dynamically. Next we've got the Pro Q2. I'll just play you without and then with. Okay, so this is one of the most important aspects of mixing something that's got a lot of layers in. It's the two aspects are cutting things out that you don't need and identifying what you do need, and sometimes accentuating that element. This means that you're not fighting with all the different things, and you don't get a kind of build up of murk and mud in your mix. You're aiming to sort of, as far as you can, have clarity across the board. So here I've high passed and taken some of the low end stuff out that I'm not going to be needing. It's something around 300. It's a bit kind of ringing at 300. A little bit of the brightness around 2, like a wide Q, and a little bit of just under 4K. This is an area where you can find this kind of white noisy. I'll just show you. It's a little thing on its own. I'm not actually pulling tons of that out, but once you've got a few guitars with a bit of distortion on, especially things like Marshalls and stuff, you tend to get that little harshness in there, so that's why I've pulled that out. Next I've got the SIE-Q from Sound Toys. This is more of a kind of broad strokes musical EQ, I guess, and I'm not doing that much with this, but it's got a bit of character and vibe to it on its own. So I'll just play without and then with. So it's just a subtle little bit of a thickness kind of thing on there, because there's a drive on this EQ as well. The trim plugin is just because in this version of Pro Tools I don't have trim gain, and this means I can automate the gain of the guitar without affecting the auxiliary level. So I can still adjust the overall level without it pinging back because of the volume automation. Lastly, there's just a Pro Q2 here, which is doing quite an extreme high pass and a little bit of a low pass as well. I'm just using this on certain sections, like on the intro and re-intro. I'll just show you here. So it's a kind of classic production trick really, is make that guitar sound a bit small, and then when the whole band kicks in it's more impact. Right, so that's Mike's guitar. Let's just have a quick listen with the bass. So other than that processing, all that guitar has got is a tiny little bit of reverb. So I'm sending both of those guitars to this auxiliary here, which has got an outer verb with it. It's kind of like a club setting here. And that just adds a little bit of depth. Again, it's one of those micro moves. I've got a Pro Q2 on here, just high passing it a bit so that we don't get a build up of mud and stuff down there. Using this kind of reverb in a very subtle way, you can send lots of the elements of your mix to it. That, as you could hear, that was just a tiny little bit, but it does add a tiny little bit of depth there. But I'll probably have added this on quite a few of the guitars, and it just helps to glue the whole thing together. So let's just move to the kind of riff section, re-intro if you like, and it's got one of Luke's guitars on the top. So although Luke did this, I think we must have done it on one of the days when we had Mike's main kind of rhythm set up, because we've got it on an Orange and a Marshall amp here. The main difference here being that it would have been on his Les Paul, so it would be quite a different sound. Let's just listen with that all bypass to start with. Okay, so that's being sent to the room. You're hearing the room reverb on there as well. But other than that, that's the raw sound. So this has got a Renaissance compressor at the start of it. Let's hear it without and then with. So that's just pinning that down a little bit. And then we've got a little bit of brightness and a little bit of high pass from the 1073 style EQ. Cool, so that's giving that some kind of teeth. And then because this guitar is in amongst the rhythm guitars and we just want to hear the melodic kind of element of it, it's got some fairly brutal high and low passing on it, and I've also adjusted the mid-range a tiny bit as well because it must have been just clashing slightly. So let's hear it without and then with. Because of where he's playing on the guitar and stuff, it's not like you're missing too much when that is engaged. So it's just making sure that we're not eating up headroom again with the pointless frequencies at the bottom there. Lastly, we've got this Soundtoys SIE-Q EQ on here. And this is just automated to come in certain sections. And I can kind of override it so you can hear what it's doing. It's basically just helping it cut through a little bit in some of the dense sections. Yep, so giving it a little bit of teeth. A few teeth. I'll just play it to you without the effects in the context of the mix and introduce them so that you can hear what they're doing. There you go. Right, so let's have a look at some of the other guitars that are going on in the chorus. We've got Luke's guitar here, which is doing a kind of atmospheric, almost synth-like thing. So I'll just play this to you on its own. Okay, and let's listen to that in the mix. Okay, the reason I had to turn that up is because, as I'll show you in a minute, this guitar track is being bolstered by some synths. So on its own, it's not quite loud enough. But it's essentially kind of adding a nice atmospheric, ethereal kind of thing to it. How we created this was with 3 layers of guitar. This is done on a Kemper Voodoo. I'll just play what it did. Here we go. So that's 3 layers of the same thing with slightly different tones. The reason we laid it up in this way is because it's a tremolo picked part, and because we wanted it to just sound like one ethereal synth. The more you add to it, the less kind of clarity of the tremolo picking you get, because if you think about it, they're all kind of, because it's a human doing it, they're not all bang on with each other, so it smears the sound. And having the slightly different textures from the tones just helps create this wall of noise kind of thing. So that's why we did that. And then this is being bussed over here. Initially we have the Pro Q2, and this is again just carving out the area we needed in context with the other rhythm guitars and things that are going on. I didn't sit here and EQ these bits in isolation. I would have sat here and pulled this low pass filter up until I felt the guitar was losing something, and then just move back slightly and find the sweet spot. This goes for all this kind of thing. I'm showing you through how I did the processing and stuff. Mixing isn't done by most people by soloing a track, carving it out, adding it in, and then hurrah, it works. It's a bit of trial and error, but it's also very much about doing things in context and pulling out things until you hear a detrimental effect and then backing off and just finding that sweet spot. So let's hear that without and then with. Even in isolation with that one, you don't really miss that lack of high and low, because the sound didn't have too much of it anyway. But that's just me just making sure that we're not eating up unnecessary headroom there. And I've pulled out something around 2. Just a little ringing there. Because we've got this laid up with the synth and stuff, perhaps that was something I pulled out because I felt it was building up. Next in the chain, have a mix rack, and we're doing a bit of compression and a bit of saturation. Let's listen without and then with. Okay, so that's just reducing the dynamic range and making it so that it's going to stay in one place a bit more. So it's keeping it solid in the mix, and the saturation is helping it to cut through a little bit. Next we've got the effects rack from Sound Toys with just a micro shift in, This is a kind of stereo effect, like an eventide harmonizer type thing. It's a useful plugin to have a play with vocals and all kinds of things, but I quite like it on synths and stuff like this. So let's have a listen without and then with, and I'll also turn the mix up so you can kind of hear what it's doing a bit better. Yeah, so that will just help that to spread out a little bit. Lastly, we've got another Pro Q2 doing some more cutting, basically. I expect what I did was cut out the area that I thought I needed and then processed it. But then when put into context with the mix, I found it needed further treatment. So I've pulled out some more kind of low mids here and a little bit more kind of mid-range as well. Just finding the areas that I need again. So there we go. So just quickly, if you see any lack of continuity in the video in terms of lighting or camera angle or anything like that, it's completely in your own imagination. It's not like I would kind of run out of camera battery and then just go to bed and start again the next day. Right, so let's have a look at some of those synths I was talking about that are backing up Luke's clean guitar part. So this is the first one. And this is the second one. So the idea with this is that the guitar and these two synth sounds just become kind of one nice ethereal kind of thing. One of them's panned the other side to the guitar to sort of give it, you know, as a counterpart, and then the kind of octave up one is just a stereo thing that's sat behind both of them. I'll show you the processing quickly I did on these. So the first one starts off with the Pro Q2, which is cutting a little bit of mid-range and a bit of low end, just again to isolate the area that we need in the context of the mix. Then a bit of Decapitator, which is just adding a bit more harmonic content and just dirtying it up, which also kind of has the same effect in terms of helping it cut through the mix and also give it a bit of character. Then we got the Pro Q2 doing some more extreme cuts, which is again to just kind of isolate the area we need in the mix. I'll just play that to you and gradually introduce those effects so you can hear what they do. Here we go. So yeah, that Decapitator is fairly extreme in that case, and certainly giving it a bit of a different character. And the Pro Q2 after it is not only doing what probably would have needed doing anyway, but that Decapitator would have undone some of the work I've done cutting on the first Pro Q2 because it's just added more harmonic content. I'll do the same on the other synth sound and show you what's going on here. So we've got, this one starts off with a little bit of EQ and compression, followed by the Decapitator again. Then the Ozone Imager, which it's a free plugin actually, so go and pick it up. It does sort of similar things to the Microshift. It's supposed to just widen the stereo image, or if you have a mono source, you can use it to kind of create pseudo stereo effects. It's just a subtle use here just to sort of push it out the speakers a bit, get it out of the way of some of the other elements of the mix. And then another Pro Q2 at the end, which is doing some more cutting again, just to isolate the areas that we need. So I'll just play that and gradually introduce those for you. Okay, so that's just, yeah, doing its thing, picking up on the areas we need. The decapitator's adding some really nice character to it and taking it away from that kind of software synth sound a little bit as well. Something that's quite nice to do, and I think we did on some of the songs on this project, is put software synths or digital synths through guitar amps and things like that, which not only helps them to kind of have that harmonic content that helps them to cut through, more importantly, it makes them a bit more unique and adds some character to them. So that's kind of what I've done there with the Decapitator plugin. Let's listen to those in context with Luke's guitar part. I think that really adds some kind of depth to the mix, some 3D kind of stuff to it, and was quite happy with that amalgamation of sounds there. It's sort of has the effect of being one thing. Yeah, so that's that really. Maybe I'll just play it for you once more, and it's not the most scientific of tests, but if I play it to you and then I'll bring in that processing. The reason it's not too scientific is I think probably my gain staging is going up and down a little bit, because I'm showing around this mix. It wasn't done with a view to sort of be trying to teach afterwards, so I haven't been keeping everything perfectly A-B-able. But I'll introduce those and hopefully, we'll see because I haven't done this yet, hopefully it will carve its own little nook in the mix. Okay, all right, I think we've done enough on that now. There's two main things for me to show you now. First is the breakdown section. So this is after the second chorus, we have a re-intro, and then it breaks to a nice kind of sparse guitar and vocal part. I'll just give you a little bit of a flavour for what that is like. Okay, so that gives you an idea. You can obviously go and listen to the single and hear it with full vocals and everything. Cheers, Zara. The focus is obviously on the vocals in that part, and this is just a really nice sort of lush backdrop for it. So let's find out what's going on in that. The main thing, I believe, is Luke's guitar. Clean outro guitar. Okay, and I think that's on the Kemper. Voodoo! And it's just got some nice twinkly sort of effects on it. And other than that, I think we've just got this guitar here. Don't want to get the credits wrong here, but I'm sure they won't mind too much. I think this was Mike doing his stuff here, and it's basically kind of violining, I think it's called. It's when you sort of hit the note on the guitar and then swell the volume up. Swells, I think, is a better description. Into a load of effects, and it just sort of an attackless guitar part. And this was done on that amp setup, which makes me think it probably was Mike. So it's an orange and a Marshall, and it's just a doubled part each side. And it's similar to that last part I was showing you with the synths and stuff. This just is like a nice washy backdrop to that clean picked guitar. Yeah, so I guess this is a kind of teachable moment, really, in terms of it's easy to get carried away with processing, and when you're watching videos and you you pick up on these techniques and you try a few that you like, and then you just habitually start using them every time, and you can find yourself just high passing guitars every time, just compressing this and doing that just because that's what you do. And it's important to try and step back. So for this part, because there's not much else going on in the mix, and I wanted to keep all that nice warmth to it, I'm not really doing anything to these parts. We got the sounds that we were happy with at the time, which you should always strive to do anyway. So the Mike's Break guitar has got a little bit of mid-range being pulled out on a Pro Q2, and Luke's guitar has literally nothing. So we got the sounds we were happy with, and I don't need to start dicking about with them. Maybe that's an obvious thing to say, but it's a trap that is very easy to fall into, and I've fallen into it before. So we've covered choruses and verses. I can't remember if I've already showed you these little stutter guitar bits. This is something Luke would do with the delay pedal on the fly live when they're playing the verses. We just did them on their own little layer so that we could get A, the sound we wanted, and B, the control, so it doesn't interrupt the flow of the other guitars. So the guitar is just doing this. Nice little touch. Okay, so we've covered the verses and choruses and the breakdown section. On those bits, they pretty much stayed the same arrangements, apart from we added yet more of these kind of tremolo ethereal guitars. So that's just got a bit of Pro Q2 and a bit of that black box doing a bit of saturation. We just added those to that second chorus so that throughout the song it kind of builds. So that second chorus has got a bit more than the first chorus. So all that's left to look at now really is just the outro. Now we've had the breakdown with the nice sort of ethereal guitars and everything. It's like a breath of fresh air from the intensity of the rest of the song. And then the outro is the kind of big payoff after that. So what we got so far is all the elements that I've shown you. So we've still got Mike's main rhythm guitars, bass, Luke's kind of melody, heavy guitar, drums obviously, and then we've got a bit of the ethereal guitar going on. And let me just play what that sounds like so far. And incidentally, I don't know if you remember me showing you the automated Sound Toys EQ. That's where that comes in, that automation. So it's just brightened Luke's guitar just to help it cut through that kind of wall of noise. Other than that, we've added some Mellotron strings. Okay, processing wise on those, got a little bit of 1073 style EQ, taking a bit of the very top end off, adding a bit of mid-range and cutting some of the low end that we don't need out, followed by the VTM virtual tape machines, which is just giving it a bit of character and softening it slightly. So I'll just show you what that's doing. And other than that, that's just left alone. It's nice to use things like Mellotron for string sounds when you haven't got the budget or convenience of recording real strings. I think it's often nice to have something that's deliberately not real, rather than programming strings and trying to make them sound real, because although you can do that, it's quite hard to get it so that it sounds bang on. It's nice to have those kind of you know, because they're nice sounds and they're familiar sounds and they have the same effect as having a string section, but it's a bit more kind of real in context of this song. Anyway, another little trick we did was to add something called the death guitar, which in this case we did on the Kemper Voodoo. And it's basically just a single note version of the riff going throughout, and it's got an octave down on it, so it's just this big chunky thing, and it's doubled. So I'll just show you what that sounds like. So it's sort of super distorted with a bit of octave on it. It's not pure octave in this case, though you can do it like that. And that just adds a bit of beef under the guitar sound. So what we've done in this case is, and this kind of answers some of the question on how I tackle having like layered guitars, is we found sounds that act as components to the guitars that are already there. So these hopefully just become part of the existing heavy sound and just making them a bit more kind of triumphant. And what's nice about that is we've got Mike's heavy rhythm guitar throughout the track. We haven't changed the tone just for the outro and thought, let's add more distortion and stuff. We've kept the continuity of the sound and just put something subtle underneath just to bolster it and make it sound bigger. So what we've done to kind of control that in the outro is just limit it, because I want it to stay really constant. It just wants to add this low end information and just stay there basically. And then some cuts just to get rid of the bits we don't need, because it essentially, especially once limited, becomes this full range block of noise. So on the Pro Q2, I've done some high passing at kind of 31, write that down, and a little boost, and then cut a load of the mid-range out to make room for the actual guitars that we want to hear, and then a little spike at 2K just because it has got a nice bit of fizz to it as well, which is cutting through, and then done a low pass on it as well, so that anything above kind of 5-6K is taken away, because we've got all these strings and ethereal stuff and vocals to think about. So that to me has just isolated the area that we want from it. So I'll play that in bypass and then introduce the processing. So it's just that gutsy thing underneath it. I'll put that into context without and then with the processing. There we go. So that's a neat little trick you can try out. To me, it kind of, I don't know, sometimes when I do that stuff, I use it really overtly, but in that case, it's just kind of a nice additional thing. I hope you appreciate all my cool hand gestures, mostly like I'm cupping a big pair of balls. So there you have it. That's about it for this mix. I hope that's been interesting and useful and sort of illustrates to you what I intend it to, which is how I kind of layer guitars. It's different in every case, but maybe there's a couple of little things you can take away from that. Thanks very much for watching. Appreciate it if you'd subscribe. Massive thanks to Quiet Lines. Really appreciate it. You showing us around this track and letting us look under the hood and everything. It's really cool. Go and check them out and give them a follow and all the kind of social media stuff. That'd be great. Thanks for watching. See you next time.